Have you ever been on a road that felt different? Not just dark, not just quiet, but heavy, as if the air itself was warning you to turn around. Some roads are just roads, but others carry secrets. They hold memories of things that should never be remembered. And on the edge of a small, forgotten town, there is one of those roads. Locals call it Black Hollow Road. It doesn't show up on most maps. GPS signals tend to die the closer you get. And people who have taken it at night all describe the same thing, a silence so deep it feels unnatural. At the very end of that road, hidden behind twisted trees and thick overgrowth, sits a house. Locals call it the Forgotten House, a place most refuse to even look at when they drive by. Why? Because everyone who has ever stepped inside has a story they wish they could forget. And some people, they never came back out at all. So what is really waiting inside the Forgotten House on Black Hollow Road? Tonight, we're going to step closer and uncover the mystery. If you ever find yourself driving down Black Hollow Road, the first thing you'll notice is how quickly the world around you changes. The pavement is cracked and uneven, swallowed by weeds and roots. Streetlights? There aren't any. Just a narrow strip of road, surrounded by trees so tall and so close together that they block out the sky. Even during the day, it feels dim here. The branches stretch over you like a roof, and the sunlight barely makes it through. At night, though, it's worse. The headlights from your car seem to be swallowed whole by the darkness. No sound of crickets, no wind moving through the leaves, just silence. And then, you see it. The house. At first, it's hard to notice, half hidden by trees and vines, but once you do, it's impossible to ignore. 2 stories tall, with shattered windows that look like hollow eyes staring out at the road. The roof is sagging, and most of the wood is black with age and rot. Nature has tried to claim it, but somehow the house refuses to fall. Here's the strange part. The county has tried to demolish it more than once. Crews have come in with bulldozers, with wrecking balls, and every single time the machines broke down. Tires burst, engines failed, workers quit on the spot, claiming they felt watched. In the end, the house was left alone, and there it still stands, daring anyone brave enough to come closer. The earliest story tied to the Forgotten House goes back to the early 1900s. At the time, Black Hollow Road was barely more than a dirt path leading out of town and into thick woods. No one really knows why the house was built there, so far from neighbors, but eventually, a family moved in. The father was a coal miner. After years of hard work underground, he had finally saved enough money to buy the property. To him, this house was a symbol of a fresh start, a place where his wife and 3 children could live in peace, away from the noise of the town. For a little while, everything seemed normal. People passing the road saw smoke rising from the chimney. The kids were spotted playing near the edge of the woods. The wife was even seen at the market a few times, speaking politely but never sharing much. And then, one night, everything changed. Neighbors said they heard something strange coming from the house. At first it sounded like shouting, then screaming. A few people claimed they heard more than one voice, deep, guttural, not human. But when the sheriff arrived the next morning, the house was silent. What he found inside has haunted this town ever since. The front door was unlocked. The dinner table was set, with plates of food still sitting out, cold but untouched. The fire in the fireplace had burned down to embers, as if it had been left only hours before. There were no signs of a struggle, no broken glass, no overturned chairs. But the family? Gone. Every single one of them. Clothes were still in the closets, toys scattered across the bedroom floor. It was as if the family had stood up in the middle of their lives and simply vanished. The sheriff searched the woods for days. Hunting dogs were brought in, but they refused to go near the house, whining and pulling away from their handlers. No footprints were found, no bodies, no trace. From that moment on, the house on Black Hollow Road was no longer just a house. It was a mystery and a warning. After the family vanished, the sheriff was under pressure to give the town an answer. People wanted to believe it was something simple. Maybe the family had run away in the middle of the night. Maybe there had been a robbery gone wrong. But no matter how hard he looked, there was nothing to support those ideas. There were no wagon tracks leading away from the house, no footprints outside in the dirt, no valuables missing, no broken locks, no blood. The sheriff wrote in his report that it was as if the family had dissolved into thin air. Of course, the town had its own theories. Some whispered that the father had lost his mind, murdered his family, and buried them somewhere in the woods. Others swore it was witchcraft, that the land itself was cursed long before the house was even built. A few even said the family had been taken by something older than the forest itself. Search parties kept returning to the house for weeks, hoping they had missed something. But each time they stepped inside, the men reported the same thing. The air was heavy, colder than it should have been, and every sound seemed to echo unnaturally off the walls. Some claimed they felt watched, like someone, or something, was standing right behind them. Eventually, the official investigation was closed. The sheriff had no answers. The family was never seen again, and the house was left to rot. But it didn't stay silent for long. As the years turned into decades, the forgotten house became less of an investigation and more of a legend. Children in town whispered about it in schoolyards. Teenagers dared each other to walk up to the front steps on Halloween night. And adults? Most pretended not to think about it at all, though everyone knew it was still there, watching. By the 1950s, stories about the house had taken on a life of their own. People claimed to hear voices when they passed it late at night. Sometimes whispers, sometimes cries, sometimes laughter. A few drivers swore that their headlights would flicker or their engines would sputter the moment the house came into view. In the 1970s, the house became a rite of passage for local teens. They would sneak out after dark and drive down Black Hollow Road, their friends in the back seat daring them to stop in front of the house. Most of them never got out of the car, but those who didn't stay long. One boy later admitted that he only lasted a few minutes before hearing footsteps moving across the porch. Another said he saw a figure standing in the upstairs window, even though the glass was long shattered. Through the 1980s and 90s, the stories only multiplied. Paranormal investigators, amateur ghost hunters, and thrill seekers all tried their luck. Some left with nothing but eerie feelings and shaky voices. Others left claiming they heard things, saw things, felt things that still gave them nightmares years later. Every decade added more stories, and every story added more fear. The house was no longer just a place where a family vanished. It had become something much darker, something alive in the imagination of everyone who dared to think about it. The forgotten house might have started as a mystery from the past, but over the years, people kept adding their own experiences to the legend, and some of those encounters are so chilling, they're hard to forget. One of the earliest modern reports came from a delivery driver in the late 1960s. He was new to town and didn't know the stories about Black Hollow Road. One evening, his truck broke down right in front of the house. He popped the hood, trying to figure out what was wrong, when he suddenly felt a strange pressure in his chest, like the air had gotten heavier. He looked up and swore there was someone standing in the doorway of the house, not moving, not speaking, just watching. He described the figure as tall and thin, almost a silhouette, with no clear face. When he blinked, it was gone. Moments later, his truck started back up, even though he hadn't touched a thing. He never drove that route again. Another story comes from two teenagers in the late 1980s who decided to spend the night in the house as part of a dare. They brought flashlights, sleeping bags, and a camera. At first, everything was quiet. They joked, they explored, they even carved their initials into one of the walls. But around midnight, things changed. They heard what they thought was whispering upstairs. When they shined their flashlights toward the staircase, the whispering stopped, but the sound of footsteps began, slow and deliberate, moving down each step. They ran before finding out who or what was coming down. Later, when they developed their camera film, one of the pictures showed what looked like a handprint on the inside of a broken window, a hand much larger than any human's. And then, there's the case from the early 2000s, told by a local couple. They weren't believers in the paranormal. In fact, they laughed at the stories and decided to prove everyone wrong by visiting the house at night. They parked just outside the property and sat in their car, waiting. At first, it was uneventful, but then the wife said she noticed a light flickering upstairs, as if a lantern was being carried from room to room. The husband didn't see it, but he admitted that he heard something else. Children laughing. The sound came from all around them, echoing through the trees, even though no one was there. He turned on the engine to leave, but the car wouldn't start. The laughter grew louder, and then, just as suddenly as it began, it stopped. The car roared to life, and they sped away. To this day, they refuse to even drive down that road. These stories aren't isolated. Flickering lights, children's voices, footsteps in empty halls, figures in the doorway. Each account is different, but they all carry one detail in common: a deep, gut-level fear that the house is aware of who comes near it, and that it wants them to know they're not welcome. In recent years, the forgotten house on Black Hollow Road has drawn the attention of ghost hunters, paranormal teams, and even a few skeptics determined to prove the stories wrong. Several investigators have brought cameras, voice recorders, and electromagnetic detectors into the house. Almost every time, something goes wrong. Batteries drain within minutes. Cameras shut off without warning. Some recordings play back faint whispers or muffled cries that no one heard at the time. One investigator even claimed his arm was scratched during filming, though nothing appeared on the footage, only his reaction. Skeptics argue that these experiences are fueled by suggestion. They say the house sits on unstable ground, and that shifting wood creates the noises mistaken for. The truth is, no one knows what the house really is. Is it just an abandoned home with a dark history, amplified by the human mind's tendency to fear the unknown? Or is it something far stranger, something alive in its own way, feeding on the curiosity and terror of anyone who dares to look at it too long? Some believe the house itself is the mystery, that it doesn't just sit on cursed ground, it is the curse. Others suggest that it's a doorway, a kind of trap that opens when someone lingers too close. And there are those who wonder if the family that vanished was never really taken at all, but transformed into something that still walks its empty halls. No theory fits perfectly. Every time someone tries to explain the house, more questions rise up. Why hasn't it collapsed after all these years? Why does it resist every attempt to be destroyed? Why do so many who visit it leave convinced that the house was aware of them? Maybe some mysteries aren't meant to be solved. Maybe the house will always remain what it has been from the start, a place where time stops, where answers disappear, and where those who get too close risk becoming part of the story themselves. So, the forgotten house still stands at the end of Black Hollow Road, abandoned, waiting. Some say it's just an old ruin with a tragic history. Others believe it's something far worse, a place that watches and waits for anyone foolish enough to stop in front of it. The truth? We may never know, because the people who get too close don't always come back to tell their stories. If you ever find yourself on Black Hollow Road, remember this. Don't slow down. Don't stop. And whatever you do, don't look at the house. But now I want to hear from you. Do you think the forgotten house is simply a legend, grown bigger over time? Or do you believe something truly supernatural is hiding there? Let me know your theories in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this story and want more chilling mysteries like this one, make sure to like the video and subscribe. It really helps keep the channel alive. Until next time, stay curious, stay safe, and never forget that some doors should never be opened. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, hit that like button, subscribe, and ring the bell for more. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to hear from you. See you in the next one. Bye for now.